On agenda items, do we have any speakers? We have two speakers. Okay, thank you. Okay.
We do have two speakers. The first speaker is Ed Wentworth Hollyfield on agenda item number 301. Dr. Hollyfield, if you would, come and state your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Mr. Hollyfield, name and address for the record, please, sir.
Dr. Ed Hollyfield, Longleaf Court. Doctor, if Roxanne doesn't mind.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. That was rude. I got caught up.
Wait, these are my 3 minutes. You need to back it up.
Oh, no, I'm going to give you a few minutes extra, isn't me?
Yeah. I want to have every bit of my time and then more.
Could you restart the clock for Dr. Hollyfield, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Are we getting this just today?
May 10th, 2017. United Partners for Human Services. This is when Rob Renzi initially threatened to call the police on me. 6 months before the open house for the new structure. So let's be real. What's going on here? What's going on here is really retaliation, because I reported all those cancer-causing agents to DEP. The city didn't report it. The county didn't report it. Big Ben Cares didn't report it. The health department didn't report it. If I hadn't reported those cancer-causing agents to DEP, this community still wouldn't know about it. Because apparently nobody had intended to report it. So what we're really dealing with here are cancer-causing agents that were on that work site that I reported to DEP and nobody else did. So therefore, it should not be surprising that Rob Renzi would want to call the police on me. He did it twice. Once on May 10th, and the other one in November, 6 months later. So this is clear-cut retaliation. And what about this thing about Roxanne refusing to call me doctor? That's a legitimate subject. You think Roxanne would have refused to call any white doctor? Doctor? No, she saved that for me. And I just gave her some other options in terms of what she might really want to call me. So y'all shouldn't get upset over that. I gave her a number of options. If she didn't want to call me doctor, well, you already know the litany.
Yeah, we do.
In terms of what she could have called me. You can sit up there grinning if you want to, Curtis. But this is the real, look, don't interrupt me. Don't interrupt me. So I was helping her out. I was helping her out. And as for Rob Renzi suggesting that implying that I was calling people leaving the facility nigger.
Dr. Hollyfield, if you could, please conclude your comments.
That was just a page out of the Donald Trump playbook. And when he said people told him that I had said that, when in fact that is only consistent with pathological lying similar to Donald Trump. So I think we need to keep this discussion in the arena that it deserves. I did the community a favor by reporting all that contamination, the benzoate pyrene, the chromium.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for Dr. Holyfield.
That could have, don't interrupt me.
Well, your 3 minutes are up, so I have a quick
Don't
question.
interrupt me, but you don't have a right to, you still don't have, you don't run this show.
Is Dr. Holyfield's time up?
Excuse me?
Is it
About
time
2
up?
minutes ago.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll sum up by just saying one thing, because I know y'all don't want to hear it. This thing is about contamination, the fact that none of y'all intended to report it, and that Rob Renzi took out retaliation against me. He called me a liar.
Dr. Holyfield,
He
wrap it
called
up now.
Commissioner Proctor a liar. So does that mean the next 2 black people to be banned by Big Ben Cares are going to be Commissioner Proctor? Sylvia Hubbard has been banned.
Dr. Holyfield?
Who next on the list? Who's the next black person to be banned by Big Ben Cares?
Dr. Holyfield, I've been fair. Come on now.
I just have a quick question, Dr. Holyfield. The data that you had that you went from that nobody else reported, where did you get that?
I got it from Big Ben Cares, from their own environmental survey. Bonnie Roberts, BK, this leadership person, Bonnie K. Johnson, the architect. There was an environmental survey that they had to do. The only problem, you know what the problem was?
No, you answered my
didn't
question.
read it.
You answered, but it was turned in to somebody.
I did a public records request.
Okay,
A public records.
so it was reported.
And I got the, no, it wasn't.
I'm
I
not
had to
interested
get
in
it
you
from-
guys going back and forth. Do you have any more questions?
Question was answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Holyfield, I appreciate you.
Thank
Thank
you. I
you.
do have
Yes, sir.
2
And I
additional.
apologize again for missing Dr. Holyfield. Next speaker.
We do have 2 additional speakers. Speaker card for Curtis Taylor on agenda item number 502. If you could, please state your name and address for the record. 3 minutes. Thank you.
Curtis Taylor, 923 Old Bamage Road. I'm with the Tallahassee Urban League, and we're here again to request support for CRA funding for the Taylor House. As most of you know, the Taylor House was built in 1894 by the Taylors, grandparents to Aquilina Howell, who was one of our great leaders in terms of educational and also civil rights. It's because of her vision that we're standing here today. We need some major repairs done at the Taylor House, which includes new roof, new windows, central heat and air, extensive siding repair. Both of the porches needs to be replaced, the front porch and the balcony, exterior paint, and some other work. Now, with the exception of this year, the previous 3 years prior to that, we worked with Leon County School System, and we had at least 200 students out each year to come out, and we provided them with tours, and more importantly, we set up sites to show them how our forefathers and those back in the 19th century lived with no electricity, no plumbing. We had a bucket up there with a lid on it, so we said, what is that? They said, oh, they're cooking. They said, no, that's incorrect. It's a slop bucket. They could not believe it. That they use outhouses. So it's very educational and very eye-opening to our students. And we're hoping that we can have other museums around the state to start doing something similar in terms of educating our students. We didn't do it this year. Hopefully we're able to secure CRA funding, and we will be able to repair the Taylor House and then have our students back out next year. Now, when we look at the budget request, when we met with staff, we talked about CRA. There are a lot of items in there, some of we're not even familiar with, but here again, this is probably our 3rd time coming back requesting CRA funding. When we look at Frenchtown, we look at the apartment complex that's going up, millions and millions of dollars. Right next to us, the Cassandra's house, which was basically demolished and now they're rebuilding it. Landmark, millions and millions of dollars. We're asking for $77,000 to repair a historical house in Frenchtown, built by the Taylors in 1894, and the grandparents of Aquilina Howell. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Next speaker.
Next speaker is Reverend Farrell on agenda item number 502. Please state your name and address for the record, 3 minutes, and thank you.
Reverend Farrell, good to see you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Ernest Farrell. I'm the President CEO of the Tallahassee Urban League. This is my 47th year as President CEO, long before most of you were born, of course. I do want to recognize the fact that our agency have been a partner with the city for most of those years. We've been able to make an impact on housing, youth services, and many other areas of concern that the city has and we have as well. The Taylor House is almost the last remnants of what's going on in Frenchtown, basically. We want to keep it that way because we hold the value of its history through the artifacts and through all of the information that the Taylor House provides. And so we are really appealing to the city, to at least CRA, to consider funding the program in its entirety rather than attaching it with a grant where we have to pay it back. We're a nonprofit community-based organization. We don't have the resources to do that. And we've asked for a minimum amount of resources. So we're asking that the city really consider this on a CRA basis 100% so that we can go in, make it worthy of its presence, of its historical value, and be able to get it rehabilitated to a standard that I think the city would approve of. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend.
Thank
Next
you.
speaker.
I do have 2 speaker cards, additional speaker cards. Jim Bellamy, agenda item number 504. Please state your name and address for the record, 3 minutes, and thank you. Directly behind him will be Mr. Bill Wilson.
Good morning. My name is Jim Bellamy. I live at 532 West Georgia Street. I'm here to support agenda item 504 to put $200,000 in the demolition funds for a lot of those houses that we have in the neighborhood that has been a danger to some people. We've had all kinds of things to go on. We have people using drugs in them. We have people that allegedly raped someone and all that kind of stuff. And we need to remove those houses from the community so that they won't be not only an eyesore, but they won't present a danger to people in the community. What we're hoping is that we can get those out the way so that we can continue to promote our block-by-block theory in terms of housing for the community. We thank you very much, and we want to give our support to that.
I would like to ask you to come and give us a presentation on that block-to-block, the one that you gave in Tampa.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm asking the staff and the board if they would be interested in that, but I would.
Okay.
Any objection? Staff, you can bring that back?
We will.
Okay.
January? Can we do that in January?
We can do that in January.
Sounds great.
Where it would be up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Bellamy.
We did become runner-up in that. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate all you do. Next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Bill Wilson. Name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Bill Wilson, 1816 Old Fort Drive. Want to speak in support of both 504 and 505. I think Jim was clear about the issues around the demolition. 505 deals with the corner of Okaloosa and Saxon and Bond. And the block-by-block proposal we're coming to you with in January has redevelopment around the park. And this is a corner of that park. 2 of these parcels are actually owned by the city, and 3 of them are in private hands, and this will allow us to redevelop that whole five parcel corner. We've met with the neighborhood association, presented some options to them. They're kind of in agreement of where we want to go. And so getting access to this block, getting these, there's a house and a shed on 2 of these parcels that really need to come down before they fall down. So support for both of those articles, please.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question if we're done.
I got a question by the mayor, and Commissioner Proctor has asked to speak following the mayor. If there's any other commissioners that want to speak during this segment, I would ask that you let me know now.
Yeah, I have a question about the Taylor House, and I'm not sure if it's you, Wayne, or if it's Roxanne, but I'll ask it anyway. Can you give us a little bit of history of how that came in possession of Urban League? What's the ongoing sort of sustainable funding source for it? I'd like for us to be in a position to help because I get the argument of trying to preserve as much historic preservation in the area as we can, but stabilizing it is one thing. The ongoing funding, upkeep, and the perpetuity of that property is another. So I'm just curious what the analysis has been on that.
The Taylor House folks would need to respond to the sustainability of that portion.
Okay.
Can we take that during the item? Or you want to take it now?
We have
Yes,
an
ma'am.
item to discuss this.
Okay, that's fine.
You want to take it now?
Nope, I'll wait.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Pryor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, you saw in the newspaper on Saturday a report that Dr. Hollifield received a letter coming from Attorney Jason Taylor telling him not to come on the property of the Big Bend Cares property there, which is funded by public dollars. Commissioners, this is something which I think that our board cannot endorse. And this building and this facility is never open, and Dr. Hollifield is being banned from a place that has never existed one day for business. I don't get that. I'd like for us to deal with that. I'm asking and have asked the chair that we rescind any funding to Big Bend Cares, Point Health and Wellness Center, because they clearly are discriminating. There's no basis. There's absolutely zero history of Dr. Ed Hollifield, a cardiologist, having any violent behavior, nothing associated with mayhem, disorder, public misconduct. This is just amazing. And if we allow for momentum to gather, that Big Bend Cares can cherry pick, select those who can't come, this is not the domino that should fall. We could easily have black people all disallowed, or any category of people that they desire not to serve, don't want on their property. This is just the most outrageous thing I've ever saw coming from any kind of healthcare entity that's supposed to be serving the public, of which this body has given $375,000 a year for 4 years. This is unacceptable. And I'm asking for some discussion now or at some point in this meeting, Mr. Chairman, on this item. But I'd like to place a motion that we rescind our support for Big Bend Cares because they discriminate against the public in District 1 in the South Side. I don't think we can endorse that.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Pryor. Is there a second to that motion? Motion dies for lack of a second.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to continue a discussion on that, possibly at the end of this meeting or at some point. But this is absolutely a heinous act, and I would like to be on the record to say that our CRA should disassociate ourselves, and we should at least send a letter of notice that we do not approve of that. Otherwise, to sit here and know it and give the public money, of which Dr. Hollifield is a public taxpayer, and that he can be discriminated against, I want all y'all to know I do not intend to go there. I am encouraging the silence of this board on this point compels me to encourage all citizens to stay out of Big Bend Cares. The facility ain't right. We can't support that, Mr. Chairman. I thank you for the 3 minutes on the front end of this meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Pryor, for your comments. 3.01. And Commissioner Pryor, if you want to bring that back up at item number 9.01, you're more than welcome. If the board wants to comment during that time, we can comment, because it would be considered an unagenda item. This is not on the agenda. Roxanne?
Okay, we're going to give you just a few quick project updates.
Thank you.
The board had asked at the last meeting for an update on the DoubleTree construction. Basically, we spoke with the developers and with the city staff that's working on that. Right now, they're going through design, and there are a few fairly complex design issues they need to work out. As you know, they'll be building another floor on the DoubleTree Hotel. That's going to require large cranes and a lot of very delicate work in a very congested area. So they're working through all of those issues. By the time they have the road closure permit secured, they expect to know what the final design would be. They're expecting to start construction of the new floor after the 2018 legislative session. They expect construction to be completed by December 2018. After that, the sidewalk improvements will begin in December 2018 or January 2019 and should take about 9 months. And that's where we are. We'll keep you up to speed on that if you have any other questions. North American Properties, we are working diligently with North American staff and the Tourist Development Council park staff to ensure that all the designs are completed, everything's done as per the direction given by this board. We're working on the final documentation. We expect to have all of that completed by early to mid-December. Frenchtown Southside redevelopment plan. As you know, we've been working on that for several months now. We are still working on it. We're getting ready to hold public workshops again and take it back to our CAC to show them the work that we've done per their direction. However, I just want to note that we need to hold off a little bit until the expansion issue for Frenchtown Southside is resolved, because if the board does expand, then we need to include that in the plan. We only want to do that once. So we're moving forward on that and waiting for further direction. That is it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Roxanne.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Dozier?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Roxanne, the redevelopment plan, I understand wanting to include the expanded areas. Should we move in that direction? And I know we're going to discuss that in another item, but you all have been working on the redevelopment plan for a long time, and I'm wondering if we can get an update. Are you still planning to go to the CAC, or is that going to be on, you are going to go to the CAC soon?
Right.
So could we get at least an update on where we stand with that? I know we have a lot probably to discuss during the retreat, but it seems like waiting to see at least the preliminary plan might impede whatever discussion we have at that retreat. I know we're going to talk about that agenda as well. So I'm just wondering if that can, if it's finished enough, if we can at least get an update on the draft at that retreat. Are you all going to be ready to do that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I'll bring that back up during that item, but I appreciate it.
We
Thank
need
you.
board direction on that, so.
Yeah, I'll bring it back up at the end. And then North American, I know that we had some discussion at the last meeting about completing that development agreement as soon as possible. So are we confident that it's going to be done before the holidays and everything, just so we can move forward with that?
We have to. We really need to get this done, so we're working very hard. And Sean has a little clock that he keeps holding up all the time, so we're very aware of the deadlines.
I think we've heard a little bit about the clock, so yes, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Dozier.
Move consent.
Second.
4.01 next, that's consent.
Moved.
I have a motion by Commissioner Ziffer. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Dozier. I want to thank staff for getting those minutes ready. That was both July and September, which brings us up to date on our meetings. That is pretty amazing. Let's keep that going. That's something the public asked for, and we responded. We've been very good about that this year. I want to give staff credit for making things happen that the public has asked for. Okay. All those in favor of the motion on the floor to pass consent made by Commissioner Ziffer, seconded by Commissioner Dozier, came by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries without objection with Commissioner Miller, Commissioner Maddox out of chambers. 5.01.
Commissioners, this does not require any action, but it is a status report on a very important project we're working on. At the September meeting, you directed staff to move forward with examining the expansion of Frenchtown Southside in 3 different areas. 3 different areas that we identified have about 450 acres of residential, office, commercial, and retail. There are 13 residential neighborhoods and 7 large commercial areas. We're working on that project right now, and we're gathering the data. Chapter 163, as you'll recall, requires at least 2 definitions of blight to be met before an area can be included in the finding of necessity. The initial 3 definitions that we were looking at were property values, fire and EMS response, and building code violations. Now, because each of these areas that are included in our target area, if you will, are a little bit different, we may need to expand our definition of blight and include some other items. We will let you know when we come back with another report. But we gave you a process and a schedule that we believe we're still on target to meet. Basically, we're going to take this to our CAC in December. The work will be done. We'll take them the update. They will make a recommendation. We'll be back to the CRA on January 25th. We'll go to Leon County Commission in March, and the final city adoption is scheduled for April. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, we're moving forward.
Just one question real quick. There's a lot of conversation at the legislature about CRAs and creations and expansions. Does our timelines put us in the fashion where we are up and going with our expansion or creation of a new CRA prior to any legislation taking place?
It does. Basically, what they're proposing right now, which may change, is that any creation of a new CRA, district or agency, would need legislative approval. Because we're expanding, we expect this work to be done even before whatever legislation is up and running will be passed.
Thank you. Commissioner Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the criteria for blight is property values that are stabilized, that haven't improved. Why is that not one of the criteria that you're using in these two areas?
It is in some of the areas. Okay. What we're doing is we're going through and we're finding that of the 3 criteria that we proposed, they'll apply generally to most of the areas, but not everywhere.
Okay.
But property values for the residential areas, most of the commercial has lagged behind growth overall in the county. So that's a criteria that we can use.
So even though it's not the 3 that you've selected to emphasize, you can pull these others? Because it seems like to me that's one of the most critical.
It is, and that's more broadly applicable than many of the other ones. But we're confident that we'll have 2 or more criteria for each one of the areas, and the 3 that we initially suggested will be used, but we may need to add another one in there.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Dozier, followed by Commissioner Proctor.
Richardson.
Oh, I'm sorry, I know he's in the queue. Commissioner Richardson, go ahead. I'm sorry. Were you in queue?
Yeah, you just said you would.
You want to move the item?
Yeah.
Or were you in queue to speak? I didn't see you.
Well, I was just going to, I will speak and move the item.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Commissioner Richardson, and then I go Commissioner Dozier. Kind of confusing.
Go ahead. I didn't know that. Yeah. I mean, if you had already recognized Commissioner Dozier.
Go ahead. The motion's on the floor now.
I just wanted to make sure Commissioner Richardson was in queue. Please go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Commissioner Dozier. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to compliment staff on the way that they have handled this, the expeditious manner in which it has been handled and bringing it back to us. Clearly, these distressed neighborhoods are those that we should be focused on now, and I'm just glad to see that that's where our attention is now, and that the residents of those areas, the Frenchtown Southside area, can feel confident that now this city and county and CRA board in particular are focusing its attention on relieving blight and slum in those areas as the legislature originally intended. I'm looking forward to working with the neighborhood associations and our Citizen Advisory Council in identifying those areas that are in most need of redevelopment and revitalization and improving those neighborhoods as we go forward. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I would move option 1 for item 5.01.
Option 1 has been moved by Commissioner Richardson, seconded by Commissioner, I think, Dozier or Miller. You guys pick. I go with Commissioner Dozier. All right, Commissioner Dozier, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I happily let Commissioner Richardson go first. You've been pushing this issue for a long time. And I had one question, but I did want to clarify one thing. I know we're going to get to the discussion about the downtown CRA and 6.01. And the full county commission had a discussion about resolving that issue before moving forward with the expansion. But I don't believe I heard anything at the county commission meeting that was not supportive of the expansion. So I think it was just a direction to make sure we resolve one question before the other. And it seems like the March deadline of coming back to the county commission for our full board, that gives us plenty of time. And I know, again, we'll get to 6.01, but that gives us plenty of time to work through the details of how we're going to structure ourselves regarding the downtown and still not impede the schedule as it's laid out here for expansion. So just wanted to bring that comment in because we did have a robust discussion at our full county commission meeting. And I think, Roxanne, you got to my question with Commissioner Miller's comments earlier, but there was one line that stood out that you referenced those three areas: EMS response, property values, and building code violations, and saying that it doesn't currently appear that at least two of the same criteria exist in all three areas. I guess I was a little confused about that. Do the same criteria have to exist in all three areas, or just two of the, is it 14 criteria must exist in each of those areas? So it could be, and that's what you were talking about with expanding those three to include other items. Is that right?
Yeah, you have to have a minimum of two of the criteria in each area. One of these we're not sure will apply in every area, so we're trying to be as broad as possible, but we feel sure that we can get at least two for each area.
But two of the 14 could be different?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. They don't have to be the same in every area.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that point to make sure we weren't getting stuck on anything. So I appreciate this. It's an aggressive timeline, and particularly with the sensitivity with session. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I have Commissioner Proctor. I have Commissioner Maddox in queue. Commissioner Proctor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask, can the elements of maybe arrest, murders, or police incidents be a factor? Could the dropout rate of an area be a factor? Or could even the use of what the school board uses as a free / reduced lunch be a factor for these areas? Are those permissible?
No, sir, they're not.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Maddox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the past, this board knows that I've been against expanding the CRA both north and south vociferously, but I just want to put on the record that I've been swayed by Commissioner Richardson's passion for this and the homework that he has done in bringing to the board the need for the ability to be able to make incremental change, which is what CRAs do, that lead to wholesale change, by taking a measured approach at this. So I'm proud to support the motion.
Thank you, sir. Motion on the floor is to accept staff recommendation made by Commissioner Richardson, seconded by Commissioner Dozier. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Are any opposed? Motion carries without objection. 5.02.
Okay, you have before you a discussion on funding the Taylor House Museum renovations. We also have Curtis Taylor here today, and he's probably going to want to make some comments for this item. Now, you recall that this item has been before the CRA before, and one of the difficulties that we have in funding this complete item is that because they need interior renovations and exterior renovations, we typically do not fund interior renovations. And, you know, I would caution the board, we need to sort of stay with our existing programs and not get too far off the track. But the things they need, they absolutely need. And they've given us a list of their exterior renovations, which you'll have on attachment number 1. Now, most of these, the CRA can fund because they're exterior. I'm not sure about the HVAC system. That is something we'd have to look at. But in trying to help the Taylor House achieve what they need to achieve as a valuable cultural asset in Frenchtown, we looked at other options that they might have that would actually work better for them. Because if we can only fund exterior, that doesn't really address their needs. So staff came up with at least 3 other options that they could pursue. Now, they did go through at board direction, at CRA board direction, the Historic Grant and Loan Program, but they were not able to finish that process. I think there was probably some misunderstanding there because the Historic Grant and Loan Program offers grants and loans, and it's usually a combination of both. They are reluctant to take a loan, and I think that's a smart decision on their part, but they could probably get a grant for some of the work. And our direction was go through the program, see what kind of money you can get from that, then come back and we'll see what the next steps are to funding your needs. However, since that time, we've come up with at least one or two other options. You'll recall that the tourist development tax money that we've been working on for a while, we're starting that program now to fund historic and cultural and artistic efforts in the county. Because they're a museum, they will probably be eligible for funding, and they would be able to fund interior and exterior in one process. Now, we're looking at the end of that process coming up in March and April, so it's not like they would have to wait a long time. We're getting ready to have the workshops and go through all of that. And the amount that they would be applying for, honestly, wouldn't be that much for that kind of a process. So we think that's a good option. Another potential option that we were not aware of, but it may be a possibility, I think Commissioner Dozier may bring up, and that might be funding through COCA's Facilities Grant Program. But the bottom line for the CRA here is, it's a good request, it's a good project, but we need to stick with our purpose, and we fund exterior improvements. We can only do part of that for them. There may be more appropriate ways for them to get funding, and we're looking for board direction on this.
Mr. Taylor, if you can come up and address the mayor's questions.
Question before he comes. Roxanne, of this list that you have here that's been provided, is there any effort to go through and see what of these are actually exterior?
Actually exterior?
Yeah, right. This is attachment 1, page 1.
Most of that list is exterior. They actually winnowed it down and separated out the big interior items, which you won't see. I'm not sure about air conditioning. I would need to probably speak with the attorneys about that one and see if that is interior or exterior. I'm just not sure.
Okay, let's. Yeah. I don't want to leave down the record that we're not sure whether air conditioning goes interior or exterior.
Well, part
just
of
my
it's
sense
outside,
of common sense is offended.
It treats the inside, so I would say that it's interior, but
Probably is.
All right, let's get back in queue. You want Mr. Taylor to address your question? Sure. Mr. Mayor? Mr. Taylor? Yes. You want to restate those questions? Or Ms. Taylor, do you remember the mayor's questions? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think the question was about the exterior work.
No, the question of sustainability.
Oh, okay. Basically, we have put in a request for the previous years with the legislature in trying to secure funding to continue the Taylor House. In addition to that, we have a lot of volunteers that work with us through the years. Now, are you talking about sustaining in terms of operating or in terms of maintaining the Taylor House?
Operating and maintaining.
Operating, yes. Okay, so basically, we here again, we have volunteer staff, we have our staff at the Urban League. In terms of operating the Taylor House, we have not done a lot this year because of the repairs that are needed. Like I said, in the previous, we've had students to tour the Taylor House, but if you walk on that front porch, some of those boards are giving away, and so our president and CEO, they say, let's just stop with tours at this point here, especially with our students, until we can try to get the repairs done.
Do we have, if you're able to, and I assume you will, be able to put together the package that allows the home to be stabilized and usable, what is the ideal vision for its operating? What do you want to see happen if this building is able to become fully functional?
Well, if we can get the Taylor House repaired and fully functional, we want to not only continue to have students to do tours, but we would like to have where in the past we basically had the house available on Saturdays from 10 to 2, and then if someone would call, we would set up an appointment. But we actually want to have someone there manning the Taylor House on a continuous basis so that if people are coming to visit, we will already be there to provide the tours. But more importantly, our thing is to try to continue to educate the public in terms of how those families lived back in that era, in the rich history of the Taylor House. Like I said earlier, it's because of Equilina Howard vision that the Taylor House is still standing today.
Thank you.
Commissioner Miller. I'm sorry. Lindley.
I know.
I look right at you, too.
Another chick on the board.
It's a lot, sorry.
Hey, thank you very much. Well, we've been talking about the Taylor House project for a couple of years. I've been over there several times, and it needs help, and we all know that. I have a kind of two-pronged approach I think will work, and I'd like to make a motion accordingly. One, I'd like to make a motion that the CRA does grant the $10,000 for exterior, so they can get perhaps the HVAC started. It's winter's coming on. I think we're going to have winter here eventually. The TDT grant funding doesn't come through probably till after March. So we could do the $10,000 for exterior. Then the second part would be to go through the TDT art funds. We approved in May that they could do this, apply for these grants that are not matching. And I think that this would be a perfect fit for this. I spoke with Ms. Post, who's the head of the TDT. She says this is exactly the kind of project that we are hoping to use some of this $3 million for: historic and cultural preservation and museums that express the history of a part of our community that, quite frankly, with big apartment buildings going up and a lot of development that is good and arguably going to change the character of that neighborhood a lot, I think that we could work on this in this two-pronged way: $10,000 from CRA, and direct the Taylor House volunteers to get an application in place for the remainder that they need for the interior and other improvements that they need on that board. So that's my motion, the two-part project.
Is there a second to that motion?
I would second, but I'm curious, you said 10 for exterior, the total for exterior is 70.
That would just that would get them started. And that's something we can do right now. They need at least 61,000, and I know that's an old bunch of bids, and maybe we could, I don't know if it's going to be more than that later on. It helps get them started, and it gives them a path forward to get this project going. $61,000 in our world is not a lot of money. We need to make a statement of working on this project that they have been working on for years. And so I urge the board to consider that.
But I would just alternatively offer that we cover the external piece, period, which is, again, there's a debate over the AC. I think there's probably no debate that 7,500 probably doesn't apply for exterior cost. But I'd be in favor of the full request.
I would. You still have the floor.
Pardon, what are you talking about then? What's the full request for exterior?
Well, I guess it would be the 76 minus
HVAC.
Minus whatever doesn't apply, but I assume one of those would be item 3 of 7,500.
So it's about $69,282.
Assuming that the rest of this is
So
exterior.
do that instead of the 10,000.
Correct.
That's fine. I'm good with that.
So the motion on the floor is for the exterior renovations or improvements minus number 3, which is 7,500 for HVAC, that made by Commissioner Lindley, seconded by Mayor Gillum. I will say that I do sit in support of that motion. I have Commissioner Dozier, Commissioner Proctor, Commissioner Miller, Commissioner Ziffer in queue to speak. Commissioner Dozier, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, if I could briefly, in case I have to leave the room.
On point.
If I could, on point. Is our attorney here, one of our attorneys? Mr. Norvell, I contributed personally $500 to the Taylor House to get the historic marker placed there in front of it. My name is on the historic marker. In any way, does that result in a conflict for me, in which I should leave during debate? Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Dozier, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That's a question.
This is a difficult issue because for all the reasons why you just said, Commissioner Lindley, why we should support the Taylor House, I agree. Mr. Taylor, Reverend Farrell, I appreciate your comments and the efforts that you all put in for a couple decades now to really have the Taylor House represent and continue to represent the history of Frenchtown, and I think that is very important. I think consistency in our procedures is also important, and helping to make sure that any investment is really sustainable for the long term would be in your interest as well as all of ours and the community interest. So there's a couple of pieces that are concerning here. If we approve the funding today, we are doing it not following our own procedure with 3 bids, current bids, and other things like that. I think a strong endorsement of this project and working with the Taylor House is absolutely in order. I do know that the program that Roxanne mentioned, we have 1 more year with a cultural facilities grant administered through COCA. There are very few organizations in the community that would qualify for this. Museums are one of the only ones. And it may not be a program that you are aware of up to this point, but the county did just approve 1 more year of that funding, and that works through COCA. And I see Carrie Post was nodding in the back, so I was on the right track. It would be the same funding as the TDT funding that we have, and the $2.5 million, but it is, I'll pause if you have.
I think that requires a match.
It may require.
And that is, that's a stopping point for many, many, many small nonprofits.
I understand, and I was going to get there, Commissioner Lindley,
good.
yes. It may require a match. I think any of these programs, though, and going to the mayor's comments, that you were highlighting some things that were on my mind. The operation and maintenance dollars, the ongoing operating dollars, what we see in the future. I appreciated staff's recommendation to wait until January to get additional bids, to meet our criteria, to say, if it's 10,000, that would be as much as we could do without having a loan program or a match or something else. My concern is that 10,000 will not, if none of these other funding sources come out, that will not make the Taylor House whole. That will not make it sustainable for the future. So taking a couple months to get additional bids in, to look at TDT funding, whether it's through the CRA program, working with COCA on their program, and coming back to us with an outline of what their strategic plan is and the operating dollars going forward. I think this is an opportunity to really dig in and finally, get a sustainable organization with all of our different resources. So I have a hard time getting to the 75 today or even the 10 today. I would much prefer to wait until January. I was going to make a substitute motion, but I will wait, and since we have so many people in queue, Mr. Chair, I'll wait and hear the comments from the others. But I think it would be in our interest to, 1, follow our procedures, but also direct staff, and hopefully working in partnership with COCA and Visit Tallahassee, to really come up with a plan that draws on a lot of different resources and looks at the long-term sustainability of what this incredible asset could bring to Frenchtown and to the whole community.
All right, I have Commissioner Proctor, Commissioner Miller, Commissioner Ziffer. Commissioner Proctor, you have the floor.
Chairman, 120-year-old house, and we create rules that it only can be dealt with on the outside. Seems, we're dealing with a 120-year-old house, and just to put some paint on it on the outside and not deal with its functionality, I think this takes an exception to our norm. Now, Commissioner Maddox has time and again told us that Piggly Wiggly, we spent money on the inside of Piggly Wiggly. I mean, I've heard him say that how many times? Lots of times. And we've done that for Piggly Wiggly. This thing here is, I can't find it in my notes, but I thought I saw, I can't find it right now, but the house was built in 1897. And according to plain mathematics, I think that's about, how much that is?
Lou Shelley's age.
120.
Okay. Okay. So that right there, an old rickety house. I was just thinking about how many, on this parcel of land, how much taxes have been paid after 120 years? How much has this one parcel generated to community anyway? But I think that there's no doubt about it. We know what the structure is 120. You just can't ignore something like this that needs stabilization through and through when a house is this fragile. And if we were sincere about the effort to restore it, this is something that you have to address inside out or outside in. You can't ignore. It's kind of like me. I could put some lotion on and try to put on a good-looking suit and all like that. But if I don't take my medicine, I'm just all jacked up. It's just a look on the outside, but I'm totally jacked inside. And that's what's going to happen here. The thing needs to be worked. I need to take my medicine from the beginning of the day. Otherwise, that suit don't mean a thing. I got to treat the inside of me first. And we need to treat the whole inside of this 120-year-old house. And I disagree with staff. I think that this fits, its age merits a consideration that we waive or something to accommodate its fragile state. And that's why I think that we should stop kicking this can down the road, or if we're going to kick it, place our staff, assign our staff to work with all these other options and sources that the Urban League might move forward with the project. But the circumstances of a 120-year-old wood house, it needs the totality of our commitment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I would support the whole thing because of the extraordinary piece of property that we're talking about.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. I have Commissioner Miller, Commissioner Ziffer, and Commissioner Maddox.
Well, I want to say that I'm in complete agreement with Commissioner Dozier. I think that one of the reasons that the state is interested in these CRAs is that there's the exception for this one and exception for that one, and this one's a special friend of somebody else. And to just toss our procedures and all of the rules that we have for everybody else out the window, and there's always some exceptional element of just about everybody that ever comes before us asking for help. Now, in that, I was ready to second Commissioner Lindley's motion, and then I was going to follow up with the discussion of the COCA money, because it is sitting there unused, and the match could come from the CRA. The match can come. Look at the Riley House, for example. They put together enough money, private and TDC and CRA, and to build an entire building. And if they can do it, so can others. But to just toss the procedures out the windows, not require the three bids that we require of everyone else, and on, I just can't get there from here. And so at this point, I can't support the motion.
May I just on point?
Yes, ma'am.
My motion does not toss the procedures. It just has two approaches to get to it.
Well, incorporating all the comments that we've heard, I understand. When you first made your motion, I was ready to support the $10,000 vote for today, but I think there are other sources of money that ought to be tapped first, sources of money that are very, very limited in scope and that are available that haven't been pursued.
Is there anything, just from point of information for me, is there anything in this item that was a question of whether or not we could fund besides the HVAC and air conditioning? I believe that was the only question of whether or not we've ever funded anything like that. Everything else was stated as exterior and truly is exterior improvements, correct?
Correct. And we would need, however, I would recommend that we do follow our regular procedure where we get the 3 quotes from contractors.
So I would ask that Commissioner Lindley, that you add to your motion as a condition that is approved today with the condition that they come back with one more additional bid. I believe they have 2 bids. That they come back with one more additional bid.
We want the bids to be legit, yes.
Yes. So that.
But it is for that, it's didn't we figure about $6,900?
$69,000.
I mean, $69,000.
Yeah.
And then the rest, I would, recommend they go through the TDT funding process to get what they need for interior. Two things, it's simple, we could say yes today and get these folks on their way to restoring this old building.
I agree. So the motion on the floor now stands at $69,282.50 will come from the CRA, pending an additional bid that will give them 3 bids and put them in compliance with our standards or with our rules, and that they would apply for the rest from TDT, which would be the $7,500 that they apply to them for the HVAC and heat. That is the motion on the floor.
And the other.
And whatever other interior improvements they may want.
And that they can get going on this month.
Right.
And that's no match. I mean, the no matching piece is critical.
Yeah, no match. The only thing I would say is that the timing of them getting started would depend on them actually getting that bid to us. As long as they understand that, we will not release any funds until you're in compliance with the 3 bid minimum that we have in place.
Yeah, get that 3rd bid.
Right. Commissioner Ziffer, you have the floor. Commissioner Maddox, then I have Commissioner Dozier to wrap up comment.
I am in total agreement that this house is worth saving. I'm in total agreement that a historical structure of this magnitude, we should do everything we can to renovate it. Being the proud owner of an 85-year-old house, I know what that means. But unless there's some demonstration that there's long-term sustainability, being the owner of an 85-year-old house, I know what that takes to operate every single day. And Commissioner Proctor, I'm going to use your analogy regarding if you're not on your medicine, that's taking your medicine today, but unless you have a plan to take your medicine every day and to manage your medicine, at some point you're going to go off the rails again. So, not that you have, I'm not suggesting that.
I always do.
But it just seems to me, I would love to support this, but I have real concern, because over the years we've had issues, I know, with operating hours and you know, just, I can't see throwing money in a situation where I have concerns that 3 years from now, there's going to be an operational issue. So for me, until there's greater demonstration that operationally this is going to have long-term sustainability through funding, I can't support the request. I would like to see it renovated. I just got to see that long-term sustainability in place.
Commissioner Maddox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, this boils down to me for historic preservation, inside versus outside, and then public use. All right, let's start with historic preservation. No one on this board would remember except maybe Commissioner Lindley, because she wrote about it. But we pushed in the city in the 90s, we were basically regulating people with historic homes and forcing them to keep them historic through regulation. And because we put a community value on historic preservation. So we said, listen, family, you've had this home for 100 years. And now everybody else knocked their home down and they built an office building, and you're on Park Avenue and you had this historic home. And we put such a community value on this now that guess what? You can't change the windows, you can't change the door, you can't paint it, you can't do all these different things. You have to keep it that way for our viewing pleasure. That was offensive to me, and I brought forward an item for us to purchase those homes or to do large-scale grants that has preserved them to this day on Park Avenue. In the area where the Taylor House is clearly in transition, and I think a lot of that transition is good. But we should have a community value of historic preservation, and the Taylor House absolutely meets every one of the criteria for that. The lot itself is worth what we're talking about putting into the building today in this motion. They could easily knock it down and sell the lot. They're interested in preserving that. We should reward that, in my opinion, because a community value is such that it warrants that expenditure. Inside versus outside. On outside alone, anyone that comes with a facade grant, we give them. It's automatic. I mean, we've had facade grants up and down Adams Street, all over the place, where people apply for it and they just get it. If you're in the CRA. So certainly the outside improvements that need to be made should be made, and I'm in support of the motion to do that. Now, of course, that means that we should dot our I's and cross our T's and require the bids and require that it's a low bid and that the work's been done and it's been done up to the standard that is needed if you're going to use community dollars. But I think it is a no-brainer to do the exterior improvements. Interior, and I have voted against interior every single time because I don't understand why we'd spend over $200,000 on a Piggly Wiggly that had already signed a lease for an interior renovation. I don't understand why we would do interior renovations for people's offices where it's not access to the public. However, which this brings me to my final point, this is a public use. This will end up being a public use. So I'm willing to have the interior conversation, but with the interior conversation comes hours of operation, how many people staff it, how much the public can go inside, all those things that I don't think the organization is ready to have that conversation yet. So I'm not willing to support interior renovations until we have that conversation, until we can nail down those details. In the meantime, the exterior renovation, the historic preservation, the rich history that goes with that house, and the willingness of the organization that owns it to continue to keep that as a community treasure is enough for me. It meets every one of our guidelines for exterior renovation, and I support the motion.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Dozier, rounding out discussion on this, and we'll go to a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple of quick questions, Roxanne. The city's historic grant program, Taylor House was already in process with that. Could a application be completed or at least submitted and work with staff before the January meeting?
I can't tell you whether or not they can do it before the January meeting because that's an external committee that meets. They were in process with it, and I think they just sort of reached a stopping point. I know that staff is ready to work with them, the staff that runs that process, and get them through it to find out whether or not they can get a grant, and if so, how much that would be for. Now, they're reluctant to take a loan, and I think that's the right decision.
But as you said before, there are grants available through that program that don't require a match or any kind of payback. Correct?
Yeah, that's my understanding. They're limited, but it's there.
15,000.
And Commissioner Maddox, to your point about the facade improvement grants, yes, people who meet those qualifications get facade improvement grants. We do those on consent at times, but there is a match and there is 3 bids and those types of things. So I'm not sure if there's a majority for this or not, but I'm going to take a try and do a substitute motion. I would like to do a strong endorsement for the Taylor House and working with the Taylor House, not just now, but for the long term. And I guess I also want to say, Mr. Taylor, you made a comment about other investment in apartment complexes and other things like that, not just based on this project, but others. And I think we've acknowledged this as a board, we can do a whole lot better letting smaller organizations know, not the large developers, individuals know about the CRA programs. And I think we've made some efforts on that. I think we need to do a lot more to educate people throughout, particularly Frenchtown Southside, about how to work through the process. A lot of, larger developers know the process. They know the process here and other cities, everything like that. We need to make it more, make people more aware of what those resources are. And I do agree that we haven't done enough to fund smaller projects in some areas as I think we would all like, and we hope to in the future. So with that, I'd like to make a substitute motion that this come back to us in January and that the Taylor House work to bring together a range of funding sources. I appreciate, I'm not sure who said it, but that perhaps the historic grant or TDD could be used for a match. So talk to COCA, work on a TDD grant for the money, the grant program within the CRA, which may not require a match, the historic grant program, and come back with an outline of other funding, the volunteer hours, the in-kind hours, the strategic plan for those, the operations and maintenance, so we can ensure that any funding for the Taylor House helps support a long-term investment and a community asset. And that would give us time to get those bids. I appreciate Commissioner Lindley saying no money dispersed before the bids. Again, I'm concerned that the $10,000 without other funding is just, it's not going to get there, or the larger amount, the 62, we still need the interior, we still need the historic grant. So working on the TDT funding, talking to COCA, getting the bids, the operations plan, the historic grant, wrapping those together into a formal request to the CRA at the January meeting. And if those elements are in place, I am going to be thrilled to support it at that time. That
I'll
is my
second
motion,
that.
Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Motion been made by Commissioner Dozier, substitute motion been made by Commissioner Dozier, seconded by Commissioner Ziffer. All those, you want to restate the motion because we're about to take the vote? Everybody understand the motion on the floor, substitute? All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those
Hold on,
opposed?
hold on.
I'm sorry.
We're voting for
The
Commissioner-
substitute motion, we're talking about the substitute motion. All those in favor of the substitute motion on the floor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Aye.
Aye.
No.
All right, all those in favor, raise your hand, please. In favor, opposed? Motion fails. We'll go now to the original motion on the floor. Original motions for $69,282.50 come from the CRA, pending a third bid being submitted by the Taylor House, and with direction that they apply for their interior improvements through TDT.
Correct.
Commissioner Lindley, is
right.
that your motion?
That's right.
Thank you. Real quick, brief comment on this item. We brought this to the table. We first had our first conversation about this January 29, 2015. We're talking about a maximum of $76,000. I understand it started at $150. We're almost 3 years later. I want to thank staff for finally getting in front of us, getting it in front of us, regardless of what the options were, the recommendations. I think there needed to be a sense of finality in the way we dealt with it today. And so for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and support the motion on the floor. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No. Aye.
Those opposed, please raise your hand. All right, thank you. Motion carries. 5.03.
All right.
I think we're on 5.03.
Yeah, 5.03.
Good morning, Commissioners. The next item is Agenda Item 5.03, and it's a request for a 180-day extension with the Florida Redevelopment Partners for the development agreement they have with the CRA for the CRA properties that are the former shelter and Frenchtown Renaissance Community Center properties that are owned by the CRA. Back in May of this year, the board approved originally a 180-day period for the for Frenchtown Redevelopment Partners to develop a proposal for the site. They've come back and said it's taking a little bit longer than they expected. They've come up with a more formalized plan for this next 180-day period that includes issuing an RFP. I believe that RFP went out yesterday, and has a variety of RFP review dates in the agenda item, which draws to a conclusion sometime in February, March of 2018 in order to select a developer to move forward. Staff's recommendation is to authorize the 180-day extension and then authorize the CRA staff to execute an MOU with the CRA and the partners outlining the terms and conditions.
Is there a motion for staff?
I'll move option 1 and 2.
Approval.
Option 1 and 2 has been moved by Commissioner Ziffer, seconded by Commissioner Lindley. I'm sorry, Commissioner Miller. I've done that 3 times today. Commissioner Ziffer, you have the floor.
Yeah, my only comment is we've already extended it once 180 days. We're going another 180 days. Let's bring it in for a landing. Thank you.
And I should mention Keith's here to answer any questions.
Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say I appreciate Keith Bowers. We spoke yesterday. I know you have an RFP out for work, and Keith, I want to invite you, if you'd like to make any comment, we'd love to hear it, but so I don't want to speak for you, but I wanted to say your efforts to make this a public process, to issue your RFP, I really appreciate that. I agree with Commissioner Ziffer. This has been a long time coming. We're going to verge on 3 years. All of our projects seem to take a long time, to
Yes,
your
they do.
recent point, Commissioner, or Mr. Chair. So I will support this. I do think in the future, and part of the retreat item, we should probably talk about how to expedite small or large projects, and have a consistent process for all when, whether we have a unique circumstance or not. So I appreciate the efforts. I'm glad we're moving. I'll support it, but I do want to have that broader discussion, the retreat. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I believe we take up workshop items in 7.01. If there's no objection from the board, I would ask that Commissioner Dozier's request that we talk about expediting or how we move through the process with smaller or larger items be put on that list. Is there any objection? Thank you. Motion on the floor is for staff recommendation made by Commissioner Ziffer, seconded by Commissioner Miller, I believe. Commissioner Proctor be our final speaker on the item.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I want to register continued excitement when I look at this project, the thoroughness with which Mr. Bowers and his committee have shared with us their RFP document of about 34 words. Is very thorough. It's not teeny. The writing, you can understand it. There's nothing hidden. I appreciate the size of the print. It makes me know that you second. That makes, and I was also impressed that the conversations which have been had with the Citizens Advisory Committee, the Neighborhood Improvement, the Carolina Oaks homeowners, and how you guys have reached out to incorporate and to address the angst and reticence of different groups, and to make and to secure everyone's support and buy-in has been extraordinary. And the fact that the T's are being crossed and their I's are being dotted, I think has been a phenomenal approach, and I'm looking forward. I mean, this project, when I look at it, think about, see these pictures, it whets my appetite, and I am certainly anticipating your final, when you bring this in for landing in 6 months. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries without objection. Look forward to seeing you in 180 days. 5.05, I'm sorry, 5.04.
5.04 is a request to authorize staff to look at establishing a $200,000 program for the acquisition and demolition of properties within the redevelopment district, the Frenchtown Southside redevelopment district. This is builds upon an effort that's been going on over the last year or so between Growth Management, the city's Community Housing and Human Affairs Division, Tallahassee Police Department, and a variety of other groups to identify a variety of code violations and that are really affecting some of the property values and may be impacting some of the crime areas that we're having in the Frenchtown Southside District. I would like, if we could take a minute or so, to introduce Keith Burnsett, who's with Code Enforcement, kind of talk to you a little bit about what we've done, but the idea is that we could be going to some of these properties have really bad code violations and get them down, get them gone, get the lots cleared out, and help not only address the conditions of blight, but also make an area a little bit safer. And with that, I'll turn it over to Keith. The last final point, these funds are coming from our affordable housing funds. The money's already been designated by the board.
Commissioner Ziffer, would you like to make the motion and speak now?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion, just make a couple quick comments if I could.
Please.
I contacted Roxanne probably about a month ago and about possibly doing this, and she had said, well, interestingly enough, this is already in the works. For me, it had come from recently doing a lot of drive rounds, and then also a conversation I had with Miss Annie Harris here regarding some homeowners that actually would like to, they own a property there, but they just don't have the money to tear it down. And they recognize that it is, and here's the word blight. And they know they need to do it, and it seemed to me, since that's what our primary mission is supposed to be, here was an opportunity for us to provide funds to go ahead and assist some folks that would like to go ahead and do what they need to do, but just don't have the wherewithal, and so this is going to help them do it. Not to mention some of the things that Keith is going to talk about. So this is our mission. We talked about refocusing on Southside and Frenchtown. Here's a great opportunity because there are a lot of homes that need to come down, and these are the funds to help provide to make it happen.
Thank you for the recommendation and the motion as well. I'll second that motion. Commissioner Proctor, you want to wait? Commissioner Dozier?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, what I didn't understand, who requested this item?
Commissioner Ziffer.
Ziffer, okay. I looked at this, and maybe Commissioner Dozier, she typically has these procedural angles and sees these things very well. It just looks like this $200,000 to support multiple city goals and priorities tends to just borrow the CRA as an appendage to the city's responsibilities and budget. And as you look at this item from a matter of critiquing city roles in different departments and assisting the code enforcement board, all of that. I just have a bit of angst with regard to our taking the CRA's dollars. It seems like apples and oranges to me. And I know that our money is to be used to build up, but we've also used it to tear down. We tore down the homeless shelter and all like that. But I just don't think that the CRA is obligated to support the city's code enforcement board. And I do have trepidation about this approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dozier, you want to wait?
I don't mind waiting until comments at all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Go for it.
Thank you. I'll be very brief, and then be glad to answer any questions.
Yes, sir.
We have an active demolition program within the city's code enforcement division. Just to give you some data, we have 42 active demolition cases on our list right now that we are tracking. 15 of those are in the Frenchtown Southside CRA. Of those 15, we have recently demolished four of them. And our program is such that we have a staff of code enforcement officers. They respond to complaints. They also patrol the areas and recommend demolitions. We have a process that's prescribed by state statute that, because we're balancing private property rights with our code enforcement areas. And so we take them to the condemnation review team to review whether condemnation is recommended, and then we ultimately take all of our cases to the Municipal Code Enforcement Board.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dozier?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Keith, one question?
Yes.
Thank you for that update. I didn't know how many homes that were on the list, how many properties were on the list. Can you give us a sense of the budget, and is the city budget currently, I would anticipate, I mean, this is a high cost, so you can't, I'm guessing you can't demo all property that may come up on your list in any given year, that an additional budget support for Frenchtown Southside may help expedite taking care of some of these properties. Would that be fair?
Yes, ma'am. That would be a fair statement. We have 32 that we are ready for demolition right now.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for your efforts. Mr. Chair, I can support the motion on the floor. I would respectfully ask the maker of the motion to consider just a little addendum as we look at this. I think there are great comments. Jim, thank you for that. Any other about the problem with these properties? It's not just the look of it. It's not property values. It is the crime. It is a place where it's unsafe and where a lot of activities can happen that are not good for the neighbors, for all the other efforts that we might make. So I absolutely support this. I think these funds are going to be used within the Frenchtown Southside boundaries. I think it helps support the efforts. So Commissioner Proctor is now out of the room, but I appreciate his comments. But I do think that this is the exact role of the CRA. And on individual properties, I mean, this is the kind of thing that's been a long time coming, exactly what we talked about a while ago, that we need some of these more localized efforts and not just the big developments. However, with the money coming out of affordable housing, it makes me think that this really needs to be parallel with whatever work the City and County Commission do on affordable housing. If we are going to demo a building and we have a vacant lot, then whatever efforts, I think our staff on both sides have about 180 days to look at the land trust option, more collaboration on the Housing Finance Authority, on those types of resources to get affordable housing back into these locations. So when this program comes back, what I would love to see is a summary of how we would demo a building, but then also immediately take the next step. And it may not be that funding for another house is available. It may be that public ownership allows us to engage Habitat for Humanity, or public ownership allows us to put it in a land trust. Should we go in that direction? We heard a lot about that at our workshop. Or maybe it's a pocket park, murals, maybe it's a garden, help support Frenchtown Farmers Market, right? So I think if we initiate this, having that parallel program is in our interest, to make sure our efforts are not just focused on demoing and building, but really taking it to the next step to revitalize the neighborhood. So Commissioner Zifford, for the motion, I would just say an analysis of how we would work with other partners, or what city county staff is doing to activate these properties, whether for affordable housing or other community uses, in the agenda item when it comes back.
A friendly amendment?
Just a discussion of that.
Yeah, 'cause
To
it
give
wor-
us, and we could take steps after that point, to look at other programs or other
Well,
partnerships.
absolutely,
or
but I
what
think
that-
today what I'd like to do is go ahead and move this forward.
I absolutely will
But yeah,
support it.
there's no
Yes.
question, Commissioner.
Yeah.
There is always an opportunity for a broader discussion.
Right.
Amendment accepted.
I'm sorry, I think that what the agenda item is asking for is direction to staff to come up with a program, right? That would be brought back to us? Is
Right,
that
we wanted permission to go ahead and develop the program.
Right. So we're asking them to develop the program, so within that program development, have an eye towards what is next for these properties.
But I don't want it to be restricted to just that, because these may be landowners that have houses that need to be demolished. They have no intention of selling their property, but it is clearly blight on the land. It is impacting crime, and they would like to have it removed. They just don't have the wherewithal to do it.
Commissioner Ziffer, I'm not limiting it to anything. It would be site-specific, public ownership or private, just our range of options to work with other city-county programs as they develop.
Absolutely.
Is that amendment accepted?
Just have that.
I think it's part of the discussion, so yes. That's a staff direction.
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could just get one piece of clarification. We have some homes that they're ready to go through the demolition process, but we need funds to move those forward.
Right.
And then there are some, like the example that Commissioner Ziffer's had, that program would be very important.
Yeah.
If we could make that distinction so that when we're ready to have demolition for those homes that are going through the process that Keith described, go ahead and move those through.
Yeah.
That would be
That-
appreciated.
That's why I'm suggesting part of my motion is for us to go ahead and adopt this, for them to come back with a plan, but if there are opportunities for us now and the funds are there, to go ahead and do this.
Yeah,
We're
but
trying to attack crime on so many different levels.
Yeah.
To wait, I think is a mistake.
As I understand it, what you're asking, Wayne, is for not only that you adopt the program, or that you create the program, but we go ahead and release some of the funds.
Yes, sir.
To deal with houses that need to be demoed immediately.
Yes, sir.
Is that part of your motion?
It is.
That's part of the motion, as well as the friendly amendment by Commissioner Dozier?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. You still want the floor?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, just on point with that, I completely support it, and you have a robust system for vetting and approving those properties on the city side, as we just heard from Keith. So I very much appreciate where
Thank
you're
you,
going with that, Commissioner Ziffer.
Commissioner Miller?
I'm going to pass.
She passes. Commissioner Maddox?
It's what we're supposed to do in the statute. It's, I mean, of everything we do, this is exactly what we're supposed to do under the state statute of blight. So I'm ready to vote if everybody else is.
Commissioner Richardson, then we'll go to vote, because I am too.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say I appreciate Commissioner Dozier's amendment, because what you don't want is a bunch of vacant lots just sitting in the community as well. Right. What we want to do is have a program where we can revitalize the neighborhood as well as just demolishing properties and having vacant lots. I don't think that does much to improve the neighborhood or the community to just have those lots sitting there. So I appreciate Commissioner Dozier's amendment and would support that as well.
Commissioner Richardson, Mr. Chairman, if I might, Commissioner Dozier is a solid county commissioner. You could expect that kind of
Yeah, we're going to go on the vote.
gravitas from a county commissioner.
Staff recommendation has been moved with an amendment by Commissioner Dozier to Commissioner Ziffer's motion, with the understanding that we would release funds immediately for those properties that are ready to be demoed within the district immediately. I did have one quick question, just really quick, really brief. Is there any plan on, after those houses are demoed, even, let's say, before the plan of how it connects with affordable housing plan, of maintenance of the lot? So let's say if it's there for 3 to 6 months, I can imagine grass grows, that kind of thing. It gets kind of ugly out there. Is that going to be a part of what you bring back, the maintenance portion?
Yes.
Okay, good. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries without objection.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
one quick comment.
I'm sorry, I didn't mention this before, but in Keith's comments, code enforcement is actively looking for these properties and vetting them, but I assume we're also working with the neighborhood who may identify properties or law enforcement. And a discussion that we had in my briefing about engaging, this was actually relating to the next item, 5.05. I think it would be in our interest to engage Tallahassee Builders Association. I meet with them often, and those builders are looking for lots to build on, and we have been in a long conversation about doing affordable housing and looking at lots within Frenchtown South Side area, and there's some energy there, and I think letting them know that there may be some private sector opportunities, whatever we do on affordable housing, would be very good. Not just here, but also in our work on affordable housing in general. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Dozier suggesting that there is an active inventory purposed for affordable housing that we're keeping a register of. Is that what I heard?
No, sir. There are questions, Wayne is all too familiar with this, about the number of developable lots in our community, and some would say there aren't enough. My comment to the Builders Association often is that I think there are a lot of opportunities, particularly for affordable housing in areas that they may not have historically looked at, and encouraging them to broaden their scope. And there's a lot of interest in that, and they're starting to look at the South Side as a place to build affordable housing for the residents who live there.
I have told them that for years. That's what they should do. I really have.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of traction now. Things are changing. It's good.
Good.
Thank you for your comments and your question, Commissioner Proctor. 5.05, and this will round out our Frenchtown Southside District policy formation and direction.
Move approval.
Move approval. Approval been moved by Commissioner Miller, been seconded by Commissioner Richardson. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Mr.
Any
Chairman.
opposed? Motion carries without objection.
Yeah,
Commissioner
and
Richardson,
I
you
would
got
say this is an example of what we discussed in the last item. We certainly don't want just vacant lots sitting there, but plans for how those lots can be developed to further improve and revitalize the neighborhood. And this is an example of that.
Thank you, sir. Hey, I would like to thank staff for a couple things before we move on to our downtown district conversations. One, I want to thank you for the ordering of this agenda, and I think our agenda should continue to reflect the focus of the CRA and the priority of the CRA, and for us to put Frenchtown Southside up front and deal with these issues immediately shows a little bit of clarity on where we're focusing and what we're trying to do. So I don't know what the fate is of this board or how this board's going to operate, but I would ask, for me as one, if I'm chair, that we continue to form our agendas to have the Frenchtown Southside a priority district up front, with those items addressed first.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
following up on that,
please.
would it be possible, just because I have a feeling 601 is going to take some time, to maybe move 602 and 3 first? Would that be awful?
Second.
That's a good idea.
Agenda modification's been made by Commissioner Ziffer, seconded by Commissioner Miller. Any objection? Seeing no objection, let's go 6.02.
I'll give her a call.
Move approval.
Approval's been moved by Commissioner Miller. Is there a second to that? Seconded by Commissioner Lindley. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by
Mr. Chairman, I
saying
want to
aye.
comment, sir.
I'm sorry, there's a comment on the item, Commissioner Proctor.
Chairman, I just wanted to say that
We're on 6.02.
Okay.
that's the Washington Square?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Okay, good. I wanted to say that compliments and kudos to our staff for getting this item in front of us. And I wanted to also commend the level and length of work which this project has been endeavoring to come to fruition. This is, to my perception, a project that will have a level of velocity to be a game changer to the energies of our downtown area in a more robust way. And I'm completely excited, and I believe that to the extent that we have purposed dollars and investments to other developers before, I believe that the Fairmont project will stand tall for many years from now. And I believe just in my ability to follow the pages, to follow the vision, to look at the photographs, that what they're proposing will be an iconic landmark in Tallahassee, and its service and the quality and dimensions of its service will give greater meaning to the word Tallahassee, in particular with regard to hospitality. So I'm very, very pleased today that we have a project which to me is a landmark project that likely when we long retire, we will look back over our careers, and if we had to smile, this likely would be a project that we would smile over. So I support the project, and I compliment our staff for their efforts to bring such a wonderful project to our community. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. 6.02, staff recommendation. Option 1 has been moved by Commissioner Miller, seconded by Commissioner Ziffer. Commissioner Maddox, you're in queue.
So a couple of questions.
Sure.
The applicant's requesting 100% of the increment financing of the tax increment.
Yes.
Is that correct? For how long?
Correct. Through the life of the CRA, so depending on when they start, when they actually get their CO and get on the tax rolls, probably around 12 to 13 years.
And the dollars for that are earmarked right now for the parking garage, is that correct?
What you're approving, yes, it will go towards the parking garage.
It
Their
is-
parking garage.
Is that going to allow public parking?
It does have some public parking for the events. You're talking about like metered parking or just public access?
Anybody access public parking?
And the answer to that is yes. I just want to make sure we got the
Are
right
they-
public.
Will they be charged a fee, or will it be free public parking?
Oh, it'll be.
So the fee will be comparable to what the city's offering in the east side garage.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All in favor of the motion on the floor, 6.02, staff recommendation, option 1, made by Commissioner Miller, seconded by Commissioner Ziffer, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 8-1. With Commissioner
Just a quick
Madison in
comment.
opposition. Yes.
This is a direction to staff, or if I could suggest, and that has to do with, I know there's, at least I heard some conversation about our parking garage having some, let's say, I won't say long-term issues, but some structural issues at some point, so maybe bring back some suggestions on how we might deal with that.
Yeah, Commissioners, we're already, through the real estate department, we are working through that. Judy Donahoe and I met with 16 property owners of the 3 properties that are underneath the city's parking garage. There's about a $4 million repair to that garage that is necessary for keeping the life of that garage moving forward. It may not be a viable option for that existing garage to maintain its structure. We are working with the developers in this project to see if there's opportunities to have a public-private partnership to see if we can fix that dilemma. So we are working through that issue, but we are dealing with 16 property owners to resolve the issue. It's tough.
16.
But we met with those property owners last week, and we asked if they could get us a response to some of the approaches that we recommended by December.
Are they as cooperative as the 9 of us when we get together? Do they?
They were actually very cooperative.
That was a joke, everybody.
Very
That was
Yeah.
just a little.
Doja didn't smile.
6.03, I concur with staff on 6.03, and I would ask for a staff recommendation be approved. That motion been made by Commissioners Richardson. Is there a second to it?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Dozier. Is there any comment on the item?
Mr. Chairman, you're moving real fast. Could I at least get there, please?
6.03 is about the
Historic designation.
historic designation. We're asking,
Yeah,
staff asking for.
I just
objection.
wanted to say that I was fascinated by the historical register that was put in front of us, and was clueless also. And you know, I understand. I'm thinking, Ms. McGraw, that to allow that designation would stifle and stymie what we have on the table in motion, right? Is that accurate? I just wanted to make sure I was not making false assumption.
we're actually not sure what impact that has on the property. We do know, though, that the developer is here, and if this were a few months down the road, the developer would have the ability to object to it, and then the recommendation would not go forward.
But it was interesting that it seemed that and I'm pondering in my reading of the stuff that I saw. I mean, the Federal Registry can't superimpose their wills on us to designate something that we don't want, can they?
Yes, they can.
That's why we're objecting.
That's why we want to
That's all we got.
Okay, so
As public property owners, we can't object to it and then not have the recommendation go forward. We could object to it, and the state may say, well, we're going to accept your objection, not forward it, but they were under no obligation to accept our objection and not forward to the state and the federal government, and then they list it.
So if I read this right, I saw where there's a process for private owners to, there's a process to object, but we're public.
Correct.
And there's really no real process set for us other than just, we object.
In real summary, yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Sir.
I think then that from a two-part effort, that we should begin to object with both DOS, DHS, as well as to the National Register in D.C., as well as through our congressional anchors in Washington as well.
Thank you for your comment. Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I have this right, 325 East Gaines is the building on the corner, is that right? The one that we have been designated to preserve?
That is correct.
Is that right? Okay. So I guess I'm wondering, I know Sean McIntyre is here. No. You may have anticipated my comment there, Sean. Well, I mean, in light of the other comments, and that this may be a train that has left the station, that we may be preempted, as we often are, on this and other canopy roads or other various issues, who knows? And we have to deal with what we have to deal with. So my question is, should this move forward, what does it mean for the building that's being preserved? I know we would have a big challenge for the building that we want, that 319, that needs to come down. But for 325, would a designation, if we were preserving the exterior, could we work with that? Or is that cost prohibitive as well and present other challenges? I just was curious how it impacts the development.
Sean McIntyre, Managing Partner of North American. I think that anytime you add federal rules to something, it will make the process much more difficult and harder. You know, with the other historical renovations that have occurred under this, it does increase costs and time. And so, you know, while we have pledged and will, through our PUD process and our development agreement, save the WPA building that was built in 1939 on that corner and use it through an adaptive reuse, we would prefer that no more encumbrances be put on this property, and at least the support from the CRA board to deny that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I would just add that, and staff may already be in this position, I'm sure they are, but noting in our objection all of the efforts we've taken to preserve this building, to assess whether or not these buildings could be preserved, and particularly in light of the Firestone building, and I think the state recognizes they changed that building dramatically, to recognize the history of the site with the Civil Rights Memorial and others. I think that is important to show what efforts we have taken, and the state is very interested in supporting business. So hopefully that may you know, help them see that we've done our work on that side, and we've got a good project that needs to move forward. Thank you, Mr.
Commissioner Ziffer, to round out.
10 seconds.
Yes, sir.
You know, they had the state owned this building all those years and never did it.
Yep.
All those years and never did it. And now we have it and they're doing it.
Right.
No, we need to object.
All right. Objection has been moved by Commissioner Richardson, seconded by Commissioner Dozier. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 9-0. 6.01, you good on that? Scott?
What the hell was this work?
You good? Yeah, 9-0. 6.01, the biggie.
Commissioners, I'll handle this from here. Basically, in September, the board directed staff to come back with a full discussion and a reporting back of the votes from the County Commission and the City Commission regarding their desire for how to handle the dissolution of the downtown CRA, or the sunset of the downtown CRA. Staff had prepared a lot of information which was distributed to both boards. On October 24th, the Board of County Commissioners voted unanimously 7-0 in favor of two of the options which you had already reviewed. One is option 2, which is a simple sunsetting of the downtown CRA by 2020. The other one was option 4, which would allow the county to withdraw from the downtown CRA while the city continues to operate the CRA. The next night, the City Commission reviewed those 4 options as well as a new option, which was added by City and CRA staff because it essentially expands on, in a way, the county's previous vote, and that was option 5, which would allow the county to withdraw from the downtown CRA without any objection, and then include the city operating the downtown CRA with the restrictions that were already outlined in our option 3, which means that this downtown CRA continues to operate without county funding, without county participation, but we also, and this is really timely, we also sharpen our focus into areas that still need attention, or issues that still need attention. It's not as broad. So that was the city's position. What we'd like to do today is to let you have a full and thorough discussion of these options. There may be new options that can be considered based on your input. And then if you would, give staff direction to have the city manager and the county administrator negotiate your intent, and then we would have to come back to you with an amended interlocal agreement, and that interlocal agreement has to go through the same process you've seen before, where it's approved by the city, approved by the county, and approved by the CRA board. And we are here to answer any questions that we can, but basically, it's your issue.
Mr. Chairman, I ain't got nothing to say.
Well, there it is.
You just did.
Well, so I had a conversation with staff about this, and I had a recommendation. I do like option 6, but we were thinking through some of the ways that the CRA board can continue to operate, given the statute that says you can only have one. My recommendation to staff was that that we have the city manager and the county administrator maybe consider the thought that maybe the CRA continues and be a city board, but those policies that include Frenchtown Southside, as well as the expansion and the projects downtown that the county is invested in, the CRA staff would make presentation to the CRA board, but also make presentation to the county, and the county would take a vote and have a position on those issues as well.
I like that.
And so that by that way, those issues would pass pending approval of the majority of both boards and not just the majority of one. And that way it keeps us because we have a fiduciary duty, in my opinion. The county has a fiduciary duty to make sure that our funds, that we have some kind of say in our funds, and that was my recommendation. And I'm going to ask for an amendment if it's not part of the motion, that whatever motion comes up, I'm going to ask that be a part of it. If not, I'll ask for it to be an amendment. I have Commissioner Dozier in queue. I have nobody else in queue.
Could you repeat that one more time? And I'm sorry.
Okay.
I apologize.
So basically, if the option 6 would be the way to go, but what my recommendation was that downtown policies would be voted on by a CRA board made up of the city. Okay. Southside Frenchtown policies would be voted on by that same CRA board. Okay, but staff would also...
Say the CRA board.
The CRA board made up by the city.
Okay.
But staff would also come across the street on those policies that involve county funding, make a presentation to us. We take a vote on it as well, and then accumulation of the votes are taken to say how the actual item is dealt with.
And you're talking full board, full county commission board.
Full county board, yeah. And look, as far as the conversation about how you come up with the sum and equal amounts and making sure the city and county have equal vote, they can discuss that all day. I don't care about that. I just feel like the county has a fiduciary duty to hear those projects and have a stance on those projects that include county funding. So the particulars on how the voting weights work, how the voting weights work out, that can be worked out between the city manager and the county administrator. But I do believe that the county has a fiduciary duty and should have some vote on those issues. Commissioner Dozier in queue, Commissioner Lindley in queue, and Commissioner Miller.
Just, Mr. Chair, is there a motion on the floor?
No motion yet.
Okay. And can I go in the queue then?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Dozier, Commissioner Lindley, Commissioner Miller, and Mayor Gillum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you leading off the comments there, as our staff is always extremely careful regarding sunshine rules, mentioned some options, but did not know where the suggestion had come from to separate the board. So I really do appreciate you putting your thoughts on the table first. I guess I have two quick thoughts on this. One, I don't believe this is we necessarily have to rush through this. It's not going to hold up the expansion of Frenchtown South Side or anything like that, given the full county commission's vote. If we ask for city manager, county administrator, legal staff to bring us an agenda item with options of how this might work, and that analysis at the January meeting. And of course, we could discuss it at our respective boards before then as well. So right off, before I comment on your particular suggestion, I would like to make a motion for option 6.
Second.
Option 6 has been moved by Commissioner Dozier and seconded by Commissioner Lindley.
To direct that agenda item come back that would flesh out the legal implications and can include your option, Mr. Chair, but other ways of structuring this as well.
Just ask for it to be considered.
Exactly.
Okay.
Just include that as one of the
options.
That's it. I'm not asking for it to be it.
Great.
Just
Okay.
include it.
Thank you, Commissioner Lindley. So my last comment on that, and I will just put this on the table for right now and I guess for our consideration over the next couple months, my initial reaction to this was we need more collaboration between city and county, not less. There's a lot of questions out there. There's a lot of discussion about what needs to happen. But regardless of what happens in the future, I think it is in our interest to have more collaboration and not less. I think we do a good job sitting here at the table together and talking about our resources. I know this is going to be a struggle to figure out the legal structure of how to manage 2 CRAs with county contribution coming into only one of them. I want to give it back to the professionals, our staff, to come back to us with options. But I'm going to go on record right now saying that these meetings may take a while. They may be difficult. I think they get better in the future. I am optimistic. We've done a lot of hard work together. We're making progress. And I would prefer to sit here with you all collaboratively, city and county. If we want to expand and include all 7 county commissioners, and look at the weighted votes on that, I have no doubt that our colleagues would appreciate that. I know that's been challenging in the past, but I am going to be reluctant to support anything that reduces the amount of collaboration. And lastly, I'm concerned about the time. Because if we have a vote at a county commission meeting, back to a CRA board, back to the other, if we are making amendments or questioning a certain project, it is a whole lot easier to do that in the same room than separated. So, Mr. Chair, I appreciate your thoughtfulness on this. I look forward to that item coming back. Thank you.
Thank you. Comment real quick. I have Commissioner Lindley, Commissioner Miller, Mayor Gillum in queue, but I wanted to make just my suggestion came at the thought that the statute says that you can only have one board. And I'm not interested in if the county is not invested fully in the downtown CRA and taking votes on items that we are not contributing to. I don't think that's fair to the city. And so that's where the idea came of us having the CRA board made up completely of the city. Now, if statute is interpreted to say that we may sit on this board, not take votes on downtown issues, and it still be one board, then hey, I'm there. I mean, I'm there with what you're saying, but it all depends on how that statute is interpreted. Commissioner Lindley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, actually, Kristen Dozier once again articulated very nicely. I think I'm not even sure why we're having this conversation this morning. I think there's so many intricacies and options, and I'm really happy to leave it in the hands of our county administrator, our new city manager. God bless you. And I know it's Reese. I wasn't looking at you, Wayne. I know. Oh,
It scared me for a minute.
I saw Reese. He's over your right shoulder.
Him too.
God bless you, too.
Just to be clear, Wayne, she wasn't looking at you.
I wasn't looking at you, Wayne. I know I like to look at you, but I wasn't. I like to see your eyebrows go up and down in horror, usually. What else was I saying? Oh, and lawyers.
Yeah.
To work on some options, because it's very elaborate. And I mean, both boards have weighed in. I like what the city commission's proposals are. I think those sound great, and that's your, I think that's going to be in your court. So I just really want to strongly support an unadulterated item 6.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Miller.
I've been really pushing the idea that we have, and this is addressing Commissioner Dozier's point of collaboration. There's so many issues that are community issues that the county really needs to have access to the information that we have, but because they're city issues, you don't have those. One of those is the example is the crime panel that we had yesterday. That entire conversation, I really wish you all had been there to hear it also. Another one, when we had a presentation about an update on the airport and what's going on out there, that was another one where I said, get over across the street. And I said it on the records, get over across the street, make this same presentation here so that these folks have access to the same information. This all started when we had the diesel spill and the huge exponential explosion of the truth, and I was asked by one of your colleagues and realized you all didn't have all the reporting, all that we had, and then I immediately made sure you did. So I have shown that I'm interested in collaboration, and honestly, this whole topic was not initiated by city. I'm not clear why. I don't understand, given the tone of the way the conversation goes, why the withdrawal is on the table when we could have gone to option 3, which limits the scope of the downtown CRA. I think there's some sort of math that you guys think will be in a favorable scenario, and I hope that plays out. But personally, I don't really. That's fine. That's your business, and you can do whatever you want to about that. But it really, option 6, as far as I'm concerned, I have 2 concerns. Number one, okay, the CRA board votes, and someone comes in here with a $350,000 request for a painting. No, not 300, a $3,000 request for a painting grant, and we say okay, and then they have to wait to go before you and get your approval too. So it's 2 levels of approval, and basically it gives you veto power over every conversation. And so why do we bother? And in that point, why not just get rid of all the CRAs? And because this is just becoming so cumbersome that it's just not going to benefit anyone. So you'd have to explain to me why this just isn't a second level approval that all these folks are going to have to go through, and make that clear to me why it's not just a veto over anything that we decide.
You want to speak?
Sure. Staff looked at the idea, and we thought that it would work out. The way we had looked at working it out was basically we would send out our CRA agenda the same way we do right now, at least a week or possibly more before the CRA board meeting. And then the county has their Tuesday meetings. We would be agended. We'd work with county staff, which we already do, but we would be agended as an agenda item. We would have our CRA issues. The county board would discuss it, they would vote, and again, how that voting is weighted and how it works, that remains to be worked out with the administrator and the manager. And then their input would be put back into our staff report, and we would go to a Thursday CRA board meeting. So
later. All right,
Well,
so
I mean,
basically
no,
what
the
you're saying
same-
is we'd have two CRA boards who would be weighing in. That's the way it sounds to me.
Commissioner Gill? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I just want to confirm that option 6 is do not accept the status report on the sunsetting of the Downtown Community Redevelopment Agency. Is that option 6 that's the motion?
No.
It's the
It's provide staff direction regarding the county phase-out of the DT district and direct the city manager and county administrator to negotiate a revised interlocal.
Got it, okay.
It's a very broad.
Got it. So I concur with Commissioner Miller that this isn't a conversation that the city wanted to have. I agree that cooperation should be the high standard. That should we should all be sort of striving toward. This was initiated by the county and further confirmed by you all's unanimous vote to withdraw from the CRA, downtown CRA. And if that is the case, if we are moving in that direction for the county to be able to withdraw from the downtown CRA, then we're going back to the original constitution of the CRA, which is the Southside CRA, which was the original district. And under the original district, the only folks who served as members of the board was the city. When we expanded the district, it was negotiated, the terms were negotiated to expand and include the representation of the county as a part of input and a voting member of the board. But CRAs around the state, it's a rare occasion for the county to sit as decision makers over the district. And so if we're going back to the original constitution, what the constitution of the board was under its original formation of the CRA, I'm not in favor of any other method of voting or weightedness. I'm only in favor of it going back to its original constitution, which would be the city sits as the CRA board and makes those decisions. If it is that the county would like to express its opinions on the matters through a vote, I think that's totally fine. I think it'd be wonderful to know what the county thinks about projects that obviously occur within the county, which the city's in the county, as is the CRA district. As for that opinion to have weight to it with regard to a vote, I'm against that as well. My hope and preference would be that we could stay united as the CRA, and that we could, as the CRA board, hash out and negotiate whether or not we think it makes sense to continue a downtown CRA. If we want to debate whether or not we want to sunset that, I think that makes sense. But that's not the debate that we're having. The conversation is to withdraw one of our partners from the partnership. If we go down that road, my position is that we go back to the original constitution of the CRA board.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Dozier?
Do you have someone else in queue, Mr. Chair? I'm sorry.
Say?
Okay. I didn't know if you had someone else in queue.
No, it's just you.
Okay. Thank you. With due respect, Mr. Mayor, I don't think, this is a negotiation on the interlocal agreement. A lot has happened since the original, and there was legal input and other things like that. I think we are going backwards and impeding our progress if we take a line that we want to separate. We have made incredible progress. We just had a great conversation about affordable housing a few weeks ago. It just tied into a few items here. We need resources from both governments pooled together and the ideas from both governments and the constituents that we all hear from, city and county, to really effectuate the change we want to see. I would like to ask one question, and I can't look this up right now, so I'm not sure if this is a question that can come back or not. I have always assumed that the TIF is set and unchangeable. I will say I've heard from some folks that are really advocating and hoping that the county were to reconsider the downtown CRA. And what I have said, our agenda item kind of laid out that there's a lot of development and investment that isn't coming to the CRA for request. I appreciate the city's discussion on a limited scope and the infrastructure. In our agenda item, or our motion, we actually directed OEV to look at enterprise zone-like programs. That was something the state phased out a few years ago. I don't want to see a vacuum downtown with no support for businesses and redevelopment. And I think we've got a joint department, OEV, that could look at other incentives. So limiting the scope, I don't want to get this conversation into a divide. If there is a third option to dramatically limit the scope, this conversation started on the county side not because of the budget issues. That was an additional issue. That keeps coming up in the agenda, but in our agenda, you see the clear history that it came up at our retreat, just wondering whether or not downtown needed to exist anymore because of the progress that's been made. I believe the chairman brought that up. And then the homestead exemption was an added issue. So if there was any way to limit the county contribution, reduce that, and limit the scope of the downtown CRA, I don't know if that's statutorily possible, but I'd be open to hearing that option. I would like staff to go back and do a deep dive on this. We keep, we've gone through a lot of these, what does it look like? Now it's, really getting down to it. So if there is a third option that staff can, and the city and county working together can come back and say, limit the county contribution to a very small amount that can support the infrastructure, it may be workable for the county. I don't know.
Would you like to amend your motion to state that?
If that is an option, statutory or anything like that, Wayne, do you got where I'm coming from with this?
Yeah, I know what we're just going to have to get legal folks looking at
Yes,
this.
I don't want an answer right now, but just if there are other options like that, the county is looking at the budget and the county is looking at the need for the downtown CRA. If there is a need for infrastructure and if we can limit our contribution to something small that supports that very limited scope, I want to hear that option too. So, and I think others would be as well.
And doesn't 6 embrace that?
No,
I think
option 6.
Option 6 would embrace that. It's
would
an
not.
open-ended.
Option 6 states specifically to phase out by 2020 and have the administrator and the manager talk about how to go about doing that.
Okay, so I will add to that if the second would, if staff has a third option for us, we are open to hearing that as well. But it may not be statutorily allowed to do anything other than what we're considering right now.
Is the second?
Yeah, I mean, I think we want the staff and the attorneys to have as broad a, look at this as possible. When you say regarding the phase out, I guess regarding gives me a little wiggle room. It's like, what are all of the approaches? And maybe that is one. Right. So I don't, if that's an amendment to the.
That would be an amendment to the motion.
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, I would.
Just sort of added information.
I mean, well, the motion in the second has added that to the motion. My comment real quick is that I would be willing to entertain it as just information in the item. But as I look at this motion says clearly to phase out county contribution and to have the city manager and administrator talk about ways to do that.
Mr. Chair, may I clarify real quick?
Yes, please.
We have a 7-0 vote at the county commission.
Yes.
That is the direction from the full county commission. The city commission addressed this, and now we're back at the third step. So any third option like that would have to go back to the full county commission.
As long as
that's
that's,
to go through
as long as that's
other
part of the
steps.
motion.
Absolutely.
If the third option is approved, we
I'm
can go
just
back to
saying,
both boards.
If the city manager and county administrator and legal staff were to get creative and come up with a third option, we would be open to hearing that and presenting it back to the county commission at some later time outside of simple phase out. Otherwise, if the county full contribution is what it has to be, the 1.4 million, I think we have clear direction from the county commission, and that is summed up in that.
But one of the caveats, I'm sorry, I got Commissioner Richardson in queue. I think you are up next.
Just
real
like
quick,
the
Commissioner Richardson, real
conversation
quick.
now is getting back to option number 3.
Yeah, just real quick on that
like
point.
to me.
I would like to say though that what I'm not willing to do is one of the things that we talked about and it was discussed at the city and county was dealing with one district prior to considering not even considering the expansion, but having one happen before the other. If this conversation goes on past the point of us talking about the formation or expansion of Southside, then I don't want Frenchtown Southside held up at all. So I just want to make sure that we're still in the timeline there too.
Mr. Chair, I think we're all in that place, and based on the schedule that you laid out before for the expansion, we have a meeting in January, we have a meeting in March, so we discussed this in January, that we have city and county commission meetings in between, and the expansion comes back to this board or to the county commission in March. So I don't anticipate this holding it up. I mean, staff's got a couple months to work through this and bring us back something in January.
Commissioner Dozier, Commissioner Richardson did bring up the point, and I wasn't trying to overspeak. I just want to make sure I got that clear about Southside. That option 3
That's what
fits right in what you're saying.
sounds like.
I just want to make sure that that was heard by the board, and I wasn't trying to overspeak him. Commissioner Lindley, Commissioner Maddox, Commissioner Ziffer, I'm sorry.
I just want to say, I'm not particularly interested at this point in seeing a third option, but I think everything has to be considered.
Right.
So that's why I'm supporting that. Just let's see if that's, also item 3. I mean, we've got a lot of stuff to discern, so I don't think any of us here really know what the legal intricacies would be, the financial ones. So, I just would like a pure, clear, let's really get the professionals to dive into this and come back to us with some specific options. If it has to go back to the full county commission, has to go back to the full city commission, then that will happen.
Commissioner Ziffer and Commissioner Maddox.
Sure. I'm supportive of what the mayor suggested, and that is if we're going to go backwards, let's go back to the beginning, and if not, we'll just leave it where it is.
Okay. Commissioner Maddox.
Yeah, I'm just confused. Okay, so we have a 7-0 county commission vote to pull out of the downtown CRA. I think you're hearing clearly that the city position is if you pull out of the downtown CRA, there's one board statutorily required, and that the one board would go back to its original constitution and original membership. So unless the county commission changes to 7-0, let's have the county administrator and the city manager bring us back the ways to do that along those lines, and then we're done with it. If the county decides to change their mind and go back to what the city didn't ask for the change, the county asked for the change. Now, this is all coming from the guy who voted to abolish both of them and seconded by this guy. I'm not sure about whether we had medicine that day or not. But if the county decides they don't want to move forward, then they don't move forward, and then it stays normal. But my gosh, we have had this conversation now on how many different meetings, and this agenda item is simply to go back and ratify the county position and bring back the details. So I don't even know why it's an agenda item.
I don't either.
So let's move on.
I don't either.
Let's do it. I mean, that's kind of where I'm at.
Vote.
Let's get the vote. Oh, well, actually, I'm sorry. Nobody else is in the queue.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I'm confused about the vote real quick.
Option 6.
And that is to direct the city attorney, the city manager and the county administrator to negotiate you all's pullout.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, with the caveat, I'm sorry, Commissioner Dozier, is her motion is actually also for staff to come back with a review of if the county can decrease its TIF invested into the downtown CRA as well as information for that same item. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I am not going back on what the county voted. If it is a $1.4 million contribution, we have the 7-0 vote. But let's be clear, this conversation, we've had this at a few board meetings. We have never seen a full legal analysis and staff analysis of what the makeup of the governance structure would be. That's the agenda item that's in this motion requested to come back in January, based on county administrator and city manager and our legal staff to bring us the options on what the governance. Based on the conversation, I simply suggested that we have never asked the question, could the county contribution be less? Given what the city did, wanting to reduce the scope. This is our first opportunity to sit down together. We have never asked that question. Could our contribution be less to match the city's additional option that you put on your motion after we discussed this with a full board? You all just said all this, for the city commission, you don't want to be here. We brought this up. I'm simply saying that is a question that hasn't been addressed. If it is an option, let's just get an information item and we can make a decision in January. But the motion stands to direct our staff to bring us back an agenda item on how the governance structure works, given the recent votes. Yes, sir.
And my suggestion, just real quick, finally on this item, and I don't know if it needs to be a part of the recommendation or the motion or not. I feel pretty strongly that the county attorney would say that we have a fiduciary duty to see and have some say in what the city funds, the county funds on the CRA. And so before we even get to a point that we go down that road and have a legal challenge by the county because, you know, we're not on the board, I want to know if there's any kind of legal precedent, or if once legal has that conversation, do the county have a fiduciary duty? What is the county attorney's stance or opinion on whether or not we need to have some say or some weight in those votes? And so that right there actually would answer my question more so than even my suggestion being entertained by the city manager or the county manager as well. So that's just what I'm wondering, because I can foresee Herb saying that we do have some fiduciary duty there. And before we even go there, let's go ahead and find out what the answers are to that as well.
Mr. Chair? Yeah, I'm not sure what the fiduciary responsibility thing is, because you all were, the city, the original constitution of the CRA included, obviously, is existence in the county and the tip from the county. You were not members of this board under that constitution, and all over the state, counties were not members of CRA boards, even though CRAs existed within counties. I also, this is news to me on the whole theory of a lawsuit of taxpayer money around Constitution, when this is simply a reversion back to where we started, initiated by the county, and a 7-0 vote. So to me, to go down the road of a lawsuit,
that's speculation.
Okay.
I shouldn't have said it.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to call that out because I think it's important to, just for our purposes and also for the public's purposes, what the action is that you all negotiate or initiated is for us to go back to the original constitution of the CRA, and everything that you all have invested in the downtown CRA up to this point is only obligated because you sat as a member to participate in that decision making. You will now, and contributed. If you pull out of the downtown CRA, you will no longer be contributing. Therefore, all decisions that are made under the downtown CRA will be made by the board that is contributing.
Yes, I agree with that part.
Okay.
I agree with that part wholeheartedly. Again, I shouldn't speculate. What I should ask for plainly is that staff have some kind of opinion on statute and representation. That's it, period, point blank.
Well, just for clarification, it doesn't sound like to me that it's, when the mayor summarized it there, my understanding of what you had said was that you had a say over what happens with the Frenchtown South Side.
That's exactly what I said. I didn't say anything about down. I said the 3 projects in
Without being
downtown.
on the board. So basically, we're back to the veto, and we're back to
No, we're not.
Now we're going to sue us, and
No, we're not.
I'm impressed with the level
speculate.
of
I should ask the
Mr.
question that
Chairman,
staff has an opinion. That's
You
it.
know, there are people watching, there are reporters in the room. This stuff about suing and that shouldn't even be part of the conversation here.
That
really.
That
Come
was
on.
out of line. I'm sorry.
Let's
I
be
shouldn't
real.
speculate. You're right.
That's not even a part of that's not where we are at this point.
That is
It's
true.
not part of the discussion this morning. So I don't want the community to think that we're sitting here contemplating legal action one against the other. We really don't want that to get out there.
That's very true, and I apologize for my comments.
But I think that what we need to do is to give the attorneys and the city manager and county administrator the opportunity to hash out these issues, and then come back to us with something that will give us some direction in that regard. And whether we agree with it or not, we can have that discussion at the time. But right now, all of this is purely speculation, and I really don't think that we want this to get out to the community that's where we are, because I would go back to the fact that in the 40 years that I've lived in this community, there is more cooperation between the city and county governments than I've seen in those 40 years. And I really believe that that's where we are. It may sound Pollyannish, I may be too overly optimistic, but I think that that's where we are as a community now. And if we start sending these kind of signals out, it just gives that other conversation more momentum. And so let's not do that at this point.
I agree, and I apologize for my comments. Just make sure legal has some kind of opinion on these things as well.
Mr. Chairman, would it
Call
hurt
the question,
anybody's
Mr.
feelings
Chairman.
if I call the question?
Question's been called. Option 6 has been moved by Commissioner Dozier.
Somebody
with-
needs to repeat the motion.
It's option 6.
Option 6.
We're bringing back an agenda item in January with the analysis from staff.
Kick the can down the road.
Is that is that the motion?
That's the motion, option 6.
Motion second, it's what we've been talking about for an hour.
Yes.
So we're moving it to January.
We have never seen the legal analysis for the governance structure. That's what's coming
Okay.
back to us in January.
Thank you.
All those in favor of the motion will indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries the objection, 7.01.
Motion to adjourn.
We have one more item.
7.01.
We got speakers, sorry.
One more agenda.
Oh, sorry.
I'll do that, yeah. Agenda item 7.01, basically, a couple of board members had asked for a workshop to come up possibly in March of 2018. In order to do that, we need to have at least some direction on what is the workshop about, what do you want to address. As you probably know, we already have a lot of standards in place, review processes, all of that. Is that the topic? Do you want to review that and rework it? What is the general goal?
Mr. Chairman,
So that we'd be able-
if I could, why don't we see what our board is and what it's constituted as before we decide on a workshop and what's going to be there?
I
So
agree.
wait till the previous item that we just voted on comes back, and then we make that decision.
Commissioner Dozier?
Totally.
I think it's a fair point that everything we just discussed is going to have a great impact on this, but we did pass a motion to have a workshop, and we will have a Frenchtown Southside CRA in March, no matter what. So I think a retreat, whether the governance structure says we're separate boards or not, would be in order. And I think the reason why at least I was interested in this at the last meeting is that, as mentioned before, and Chairman asked staff to add this to the list, the speed of our projects, how we are going to go about engaging the neighborhoods, the communication, doing a gut check on that, looking at our bylaws, that we made a motion to have bylaws come back to us as well. Those types of things, the basic governance, and the big picture, how we want to approach the CRA, particularly Frenchtown Southside, going forward is what I would be interested in. If we had a review of those projects, that would be great, but I don't think it's, at least my thought was, it's not a time to review and gut check every single one of our programs. It was more of a holistic view of how we're approaching our work and how quickly we can get things done in our CRA districts. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I mean, if anyone else has comments, or if we want to kick this to January, I'm fine with that, but I think we still need to give staff some direction. We do have a motion for a retreat. And
January.
we have an approval there.
We
Mr.
have a
Chairman.
motion for a retreat, and what are we going to do with this retreat is what I'm trying to figure out.
That's the question.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I move that we take no further action on a retreat.
I second that motion.
Motion been made that we take no further action, seconded by Commissioner Lindley. Any more discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion, will indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 8-1. We're now on
Maybe later.
item number 8, public comment.
We have no speaker card.
No speaker cards have been said. Number 9, unagenda items. We have none. Motion to adjourn.
Wait a minute, I have a comment as far as, I just want to say, related to this idea of expediting, I believe that it would expedite all of our work if when people bring a proposal to us, it is complete. And that, I'm sure, will make a lot of things go a lot more smoothly. And to come in here just because you're you doesn't really qualify as meeting the criteria of the applications. And so personally, I don't want to see anything else that is not complete.
Motion to adjourn.
Yep.
We do have a correction. There was a speaker card for unagenda item for Dr. Edward Holyfield. Sorry.
I didn't hear you.
I don't want to miss this.
What did you say? Oh, he's got another.
I'm going to sit out here for a bit.
Yeah.
Dr. Edward Hollifield, Longleaf Court.
Whatever. I need to stay in here.
And Grinning Curtis, don't interrupt me.
I don't know about that. That's new. That's new to me.
2 blacks have been banned so far by Big Ben Cares. But we have a history of being banned. TMH,
Time flies.
Blacks Ban. It was started in 1948 by Laurie Dozier Sr. and a cabal of all white men. City Hospital, built with a utilities tax. Blacks paid the utilities tax, but were denied admission to the hospital. TMH would rather blacks die than me be admitted to that hospital. From 1948 to 1965. Now this was different in other segregated hospitals. You take Archbald in Thomasville. You take Grady in Atlanta. You take Charity in New Orleans. What they would do is that they would admit blacks to the hospital, but then they would send them to a segregated ward and treat them.
No.
But TMH was different. TMH would not let them in, period.
48 to 65.
They would rather that they die.
48 to 65.
City Hospital, just like it is today. They would rather that they die. And I tell you, some blacks did die after being turned away from TMH. Your hospital for life. But TMH was totally inhumane and would rather they die. Now, getting back to some of this stuff about contamination and Big Ben Cares. Email, December 2nd, 2016. You would need to develop a sampling plan for approval, and it would have to be multiple depth intervals.
Thank you, Dr. Hollyfield.
Let me finish.
Conclude your comment.
Since the contractor spread the soil to a large area. At one point, they didn't clean it up, they spread it around. Spread it to a large area. And I'll sum up. The bottom line is, the only reason Big Ben Cares had any cleanup was because I forced them to. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hollifield. We adjourn.